talking Bloody Nun 2, The Curse. This one is directed and written by Will Krause Jr. and it's not really a direct sequel to Bloody Nun, despite the title. It's actually by the same creative team, has one of the same actors, although he's playing a different character here, but it's more or less a separate story. Obviously inspired by the Conjuring universe, Valak character. In fact, they actually call this character the demon nun. They actually call it Valak at one point, but that's not even the only demon that kind of shows up here. Now, the original Bloody Nun movie, I have to say, was one of my lowest reviewed films. I was surprised actually when I got the screener for this, because it came directly from the director, because let me be honest, I wasn't particularly favourable with the Bloody Nun original movie. So I have to give credit for the director for putting his work out there at least, and for someone who was pretty harsh on that first movie, just asking for an honest review back, and that is what I will get. Now, I will say I think this is an improvement in some ways over the kind of the first Bloody Nun movie, and I'll explain why that is. The story, before we get into that, it focuses on this brothel, and its owner seems to be in league with this kind of demonic entity, the nun. And we have various kind of patrons at this brothel, and we also get a priest turn up there who wants to try and kind of save people's souls, and a demon hunter who is obviously there to hunt the demon. Now, this character is played by the same quote-unquote actor who was in the first movie, although it's a different character. What'll happen? You'll have to watch the movie to find out. Now, I'll prefix this by saying I'm going to be talking in context of the first film. This is essentially a zero-budget movie. You know, I won't even call it a low-budget movie. It's practically a zero-budget film. So even by low-budget, straight to kind of VOD standards, this one is, you know, very kind of amateur and low tech, shall we call it. But I do think there is some improvements over the first movie. So first of all, I think this movie does have one genuinely shocking scene. Now, it may not be for the reasons why you think. In fact, I would say, I don't want to spoil it for anyone, because I think it is the kind of the most memorable scene in the movie, but it's taking place in a brothel, so you'd obviously expect something to be going on in with that kind of setting here. But there's a scene here which I will be, obviously I saw a screener version of it, I will be surprised if it ends up in the final cut, because it is far more explicit than you will see in even kind of like, you know, low budget films that kind of get a general release. It is clearly movie magic, shall we say, but nonetheless, what it is depicting on screen, I literally like got Jesus when because it was such a kind of unexpected sequence that it did genuinely kind of shock me in some ways. And yeah, it's a kind of a horror element to it, is all I'm going to say. But yeah, so this movie, at least in one scene, had me genuinely shocked. That's all I'll say about it. But that to me is certainly the most memorable scene in the movie, and maybe one that I think it will probably most people would remember it for. Other than that, I think the makeup of the nun, let's talk about that. It's actually an improvement over the first movie. Now, when you see still images, and probably the cut from the cover of this, it's easy to kind of like, I think, poke holes at the kind of the cheesiness. I think the overlong fangs doesn't help with this particular nun makeup, because it kind of makes the nun look a little goofy, I will say that. But the first movie was simply a woman who had grease paint on and even had painted on blood drips down her mouth, which just looks stupid. So I appreciate the fact here that there is more of the use of prosthetics to give the kind of a more of a an inhuman feel to it, and it's obviously clearly trying to ape the look of Valak character from the actual Conjuring 2 movie and the kind of obviously its nun spin-off, because it does look a lot more like that than the kind of the original Bloody Nun movie. So that was, and I think the person they've got playing the nun is like, looks like they're really tall. So it kind of looks kind of an imposing kind of character as well. So I think there is an improvement, at least in the kind of the visualization of the nun here, even though I would say, if we're being honest, it still kind of looks a little hokey by, you know, low budget kind of horror movie standards. There are a couple attempts here to have a little bit of on-screen kills in and kind of low budget, low kind of tech effects in regards to people getting stabbed, slit their throats, things like that. There's an over-reliance on CGI blood, which I know is going to be a pet peeve for a lot of you. Sometimes less is more, you know, and I would say in this case that would be the case. But there is an attempt here to have, you know, you've got the bit cut out of the knife where it's against people's throat. So there's a couple of effective scenes in regards to some kind of low-budget kind of practical work here. There's a few kind of sexy girls in this movie, as you'd probably expect, being set in a brothel. And I think this movie, although I'm going to be honest with you, it doesn't really benefit from it, but this movie does have some more experienced actors. Tina Krause, I did actually recognise from a few other kind of lower budget movies. She's by no means a Oscar winner, let me just put it that, and I even saw her look at the camera a couple of times. But nonetheless, there is a couple more experienced actors certainly than the first movie. For some reason, these low-budget films continue to have scenes from Cool Duda in there. He's becoming like the new Danny Trejo. I'm assuming that's just because he'll promote it on his YouTube channel. But it's a pointless scene, to be quite honest with you. So the movie's relatively short, but you know, it's not a big time commitment, and it's a little bit more cheesy fun to a point than in the first movie. So what doesn't work? Okay, this is, you know, the floodgates can open here because this really is a low budget movie, and it's obviously everything that entails with very kind of low budget filmmaking is all going to be on display here. Everything from the quality of the filming, the acting, special effects, kind of the music, the editing, sound design. It's all, you know, to a low budget standard. So a film like this is kind of easy to critique, and to be honest with you, a lot of that is fair because this movie really isn't a particularly memorable film. I think it is an improvement over the first one, but I'm not saying this is you know, a movie that I would necessarily recommend, especially for all, because there's so many horror nun movies. There must be at least about 15 since the kind of the original Conjuring 2 came out. I've reviewed them, I know. So let's go in a little bit more detail maybe. So the acting is still pretty poor, and even though I think this movie does have a few more people with acting experience compared to the first movie, you know, it still is kind of hokey acting, cheesy dialogue, things like that. So the acting is relatively poor. The story is more or less nondescript. We don't really know why this guy has a brothel and a demon nun. It's just kind of there. There's kind of a kind of an intro with this priest becoming horny. It doesn't really make a lot of sense, I have to be honest. There's a weird outro on this movie as well, which I'm assuming is just there to pad out the runtime. Yeah, it's just it's not a basic. It's a basic story. It's not a lot of sophistication here. If you haven't got, you know, the budget to do good, you know, acting, effects, all this, you can still have a good idea. But this is just a kind of somewhat kind of basic idea, to be honest with you. It's too well lit at times as well. I think, you know, because you have very low budget effects, cinematography, it suffers because of it, because you could have had this nun in the darkness a little bit more to kind of make it a little bit more sinister. As it stands, it just looks like someone dressed up as a nun opening a door with creepy nails and things like that. As I've said, there is an over-reliance on CGI blood. I think that's one of the most modern pet peeves I see from people. And it's like really obvious CGI blood, so there's no, you know, it's no hiding it, if that makes sense. It's not just a kind of plus scene, it's like blood gushing out, and it's obviously all kind of like, CGI from some effects package or something along the lines of that, and you know, it's kind of obvious. There's various kind of technical issues here. There's instances where people are kind of further away in the room and the microphone's not picking them up, stuff like that. Sometimes the editing's a little choppy. We linger on scenes for a little bit, kind of too long, things like that. So I do think there is progression from the first movie in regards to some of the kind of the shortcomings that I had with that. I mean, to be honest with you, with that movie, I really didn't see, I couldn't really have any type of positives here. And I do think that there is some kind of evolution in regards to having some improvements from the first movie. But I think if we're being completely honest with each other, this is a very, very low budget movie that isn't going to appeal to many people outside of those who like just kind of like want to get an ultra low budget movie in the corner while they're having a party and that sort of thing. Or if you just are really, really into killer nuns and you want to have a completionist of them. So it is an improvement, but overall I do think it's still quite a below average movie for general audiences. I'm going to give it a 3 out of 10, which is a hell of a lot better than the 1 out of 10 I gave the first movie. But let's be honest, it's for the most part it is still a very, very low budget, schlocky kind of movie that at least has one very memorable scene. I'll say that, so there you go. So, have you seen it? Would you watch it if you haven't seen it? Please let me know and I'll look forward to you next time. 3 out of 10. Bye for now.